She elbowed her way through the crowd, and she reached out to allow the tips of her fingers to brush against the bottom of his robe, feeling rough fibers brush against her hands, and fragments of dust and grit remain there on her skin. And he took her by the hand, the calluses of his palm and thumb against the softness of her fingers that were turning cold now thanks to the chill of death. And he said to her, "Little girl, get up." These moments of touch, of real physical contact between man and woman, Mark wants us to be able to hear, between God and woman, are also moments of power, and they are moments of danger. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been forced to awaken anew our awareness of the potential dangers and the deeper power of touch. We now know that the threat of COVID-19 is mostly associated with the spread of virus through airborne droplets. But we still receive the imperative to wash and sanitize our hands every time we enter a building, even one like this, so much so that hands are chapped and red-rawed. And whenever I see the hands of a school child, I'm struck by how often they wash them throughout the school day, so much so that my son's hands are chapped and red-rawed. I remember right at the very start of the pandemic, cradling my son, this same child who now washes his hands 12 times a day, when he had a fever. And later on that day, receiving letters saying the schools were going to close due to the pandemic, and the next day receiving a letter telling me that I was in a shielding category and should not be going near anyone who has any symptoms of COVID-19. I then developed a fever myself and went into self-isolation and spent week after week after week unable to be anywhere near anyone else in my household, aching to be able to touch again another human, aching to be able to hold in my arms again my children. I know that for some of you, that desire for physical contact has been stretched over 15 months. And that for some of you, you have not felt the comfort and the contact of touch for such a very, very long time. So the power, as well as the danger of touch, is something we are all yearning to rediscover. In Mark, the dangers of touch come to the fore first. And there are dangers of touching Jesus. To the woman with the hemorrhage of blood, there's a danger of rejection. There's a danger that she will continue to be sick. There's a danger in elbowing your way through a crowd of violence and of violent responses to the need of someone for healing. To the girl that Jesus brought back from death and to her parents, there's the danger of disappointment. There's the danger to their position within the local community in approaching Christ. There's the danger of despair. And there is the danger not only of death, not only of disease, but of death's triumph and persistence. And to Jesus too, these moments of touch are dangerous. The danger of contracting a disease. The danger of becoming ritually impure from contact with someone who is bleeding or from contact with a dead body. The danger of failure in touching them to bring any healing or resolution or to be a source of peace and forgiveness. In ancient myths more generally, and also further back into the Hebrew Bible, God's touch carries even more danger. It carries the unfathomable power of creation. It carries the touch of death to some. It also carries, especially to those who were brought out of Egypt by God's strong hand and outstretched right arm, care and feeding and a hope of rescue. This is in contrast to Greek and Roman myths where when God touches human worlds, well, when God touches women, there is an overtone of sexual violence and exploitation and cruelty there also. A little bit of that spirit comes through in our reading from Lamentations today, or at least in its context within that beautiful but short poetic book. For in Lamentations, the writer fears that it is God's hand that has been turned against Israel in violence. And the prophetic question that overarchingly is carried through the narrative of that short book is, who then can heal you, daughter Zion? Will joy and healing come also through God's touch in the morning? In Mark's Gospel, although there is a lot of feeding too, to declare the connection between Jesus and the God who fed his people in the wilderness, in Jesus' touch, above all else, there is a power of healing. A power of healing for two daughters of Zion, just here in our reading this morning. The healing touch of Jesus reveals to Mark the dangerous nature of the incarnation of the Lord, but also the dangerous nature of incarnation to the Lord. Moments when God's mighty and creative power is strangely and intimately present in a human body through giving up some of that power. Moments when God's faithful love for his creation and his people and his children and his daughters takes us by the hand to bring us daily nearer to an awareness of God. There are, even in Mark, passing moments that happen for an instant and then contact is lost, as those who have been healed by Jesus' touch are sent upon their way. Rather like Jesus' own presence on earth has passed away. But his physical touch here, a touch that has passed into the heavens, leaves a legacy for us who are gathered in worship and within his church today. The key thing for those of us who ache for contact and who ache for the touch not only of another human after 15 months of self-isolation or shielding or caution, but who ache for a touch of the divine, is to allow our occasional and passing moments of awareness of the divine presence to be shaped and formed with an awareness of the underlying constancy of God's contact with humanity, of his presence and his faithfulness, which we find talked of throughout the scriptures, and which we can almost feel in the words we heard from Mark's Gospel today. Of the knowledge we have that God has given with a self-emptying, self-risking, self-endangering generosity of touch. That God has given himself into the presence of people, into the presence of people's hands. And we read stories about God's willingness to make him vulnerable throughout the Gospels, especially Mark. Those stories persist even when we fear and we feel that we are untouched and we are alone. remembering those moments when God touched and touches our world in love. Renew our awareness every morning that God's love was made manifest in Christ's healing touch.